Welcome to the Deer Society Podcast. Here's your host, Brian Lemke.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deer Society Podcast. I'm Brian Lemke and got with me today JJ Dukehart and Jacob Miner. How are you, Jacob?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing great. Excellent. So a little background on Jacob. Jacob's up here joining us from Iowa, Deer Society contributor and AWS team member. He's down there in the land of giants with Andy Orr and Colton and the rest of the team, just cranking out big bucks. Man, I'm jealous. I think we need to move the Deer Society office down to Iowa.
Bring it on. There's plenty of them. That's what everybody says.
Walk around every tree, right?
Yeah, that's it. 170 behind every tree.
So it's springtime here, obviously shed season. How many sheds have you picked up so far?
Not that many. I'm kind of in the same boat as my buddy Colton. It's kind of more from the truck and watching social media shed red, I guess you could call it. Everybody's finding them but me. So
I hear you. I feel your pain. We're still trying to pick them up here in Minnesota. I know you were really disappointed that you haven't found any outside of the car window. Really wanted to take home a Minnesota shed with you.
I know. We were the whole way up here. We're like trying to find a road shed in Minnesota, but it just didn't happen. We were trying though. I was in the wrong lane a lot. So
Well, you got the Shed Rally weekend coming up. What's the hashtag behind that? Just Shed Rally 2020.
I think so. Yeah.
So everybody will be out there. So you better hit your properties before they get trespassed on. But
There's a property right out here, the Dukehart farm. That's a good spot to walk.
Yeah.
if you want to do some walking before you leave. But so speaking of kind of farms, you have a bunch of firsts this year, but you bought your first farm this past year, right?
I did. Yeah. We kind of closed late in the year. It wasn't until actually the season had started. It was October 10th when we finally actually closed. So we didn't even hunt the first week of October, but we were able to get early possession. So we got couple food plots in and got some stands set, and we were ready to go. It was just, that aggravating time of actually being able to get in there and put your tag to work. So it was fun when we finally got in there.
I bet. So tell me about this farm. How big is it? What's the terrain like? I mean, break it down for me.
So it's not a very big farm. It's just 35 acres. It really sits in an awesome area. There's a ton of great managed ground around it. The lay of the land and my particular farm makes access super easy. We can get in it from 3 different wind directions if we need to. The deer are kind of concentrated low on the farm. There's enough cover to where you're kind of hidden. And the potential's there to just, I guess they say the right 35 or the right 40 acres. And I think in 2 to 3 years, it's going to be that right 35 acres, so super excited to start working on it.
How long did you look for once you knew or decided you wanted to buy land? How long did you look before you settled on this piece?
Not really as long as one would think. And that kind of varies person by person, I think. I know a lot of people really hash it out and break down, every little thing, from a potential building site to, fence condition and stuff like that. And I more looked around in the surrounding area and access and what was already there to make our decision to go ahead and pull the trigger on it. And I'm glad we did, because it's the genetics in that area, my neighbors, everything's phenomenal. So
for you, just confirming, so big selling factors for you were kind of neighbors, area management around it, and then the other big thing was access.
Yeah, access is huge. I mean, if you can only access your property from one direction, then that limits you, twofold to what you can do. So without drastically changing the farm on one side or the other.
And when you say access, do you mean access with like a 4-wheeler or a vehicle, or just walking?
Yeah, just being able to hunt different wind directions, because if you can hunt 3 wind directions versus just one, well, that opens your opportunity to be able to utilize your farm a lot better.
Cool. Absolutely. So you get this farm, you start putting in food plots, you get it as ready as you can before fall. What did you have any idea what caliber deer were here?
I knew there were some good deer in the area. There were a couple farms that were listed real close to mine. So I kind of looked at that, and I think that's a useful tool. If you're looking for a farm, look at what's for sale in the area. If there's some really good stuff for sale, chances are your farm's probably pretty good as well. So, and a lot of these realtors, if you do your little bit of homework, some will post pictures that are legit and some aren't. But I knew the realtor that was selling the ground across the road, and yeah, just the quality of deer and the quality of people. I knew this was gonna be a good farm. Maybe not the first year, but definitely when we got to work and started implementing what we wanted to do.
Yes, you're talking about trail camera pictures on listings, looking at that, genetics, age structure, that kind of thing. That's what you're talking about?
Yep.
It is interesting. One time, you have to be careful though. There is some deceiving things out there too. Like you mentioned a little bit. One time, I remember this a few years back. It was a deer that I had actually shot in Wisconsin, and somebody called me and said that they had seen the picture of me with that deer on somebody else's listing. And sure enough, went on there and somebody was using, I had no idea who the guy was or no idea where this property was he was selling, but sure enough, there was me with my buck right on that listing. Like, oh, hey, I shot this deer on that piece of ground, and it was a bunch of baloney.
Yeah. It's just crazy what people will do to try and move a piece of dirt nowadays. But I mean, I don't know, you just got to use your common sense, and use your head. And if you dive into the area and who's around and stuff, you can use a lot of that to your advantage.
What did that feel like, closing on your first piece of property and be able to go on the land and kind of know you can pretty much do whatever you want? What was that feeling to you?
Oh, that's one of the best feelings of all is knowing that you don't have to ask anybody. You don't need permission anymore. You're never gonna pull in the driveway of that piece of property and have to leave. You have to pack everything up and leave, So, and for the foreseeable future, unless I decide to do something different, another opportunity comes along, that's my piece of heaven. So that's pretty cool.
So you start the fall off, not knowing too much. You're kind of going to feel this out. What's your strategy going into the fall on a brand new piece of ground that you really don't know too much about?
I just kind of went in with the idea that we weren't going to dive into it. I mean, we didn't know. So if you don't know how deer are using a property, I mean, I think you're only going to handcuff yourself worse if you just immediately go for the heart of it. So we planted a couple green plots on the north and south sides of the farm and just hunted the fringes, set up a couple soft side blinds and just to try and kind of contain a little more. And with the access and everything we had, it just worked out good just to see what they were doing. So that was the main strategy at the beginning. Just stay on the edge.
So you never really put boots on the ground, walked every square foot of that property first. You actually started hunting kind of low pressure. That was your strategy?
When we bought the farm, we walked a lot of it, but as far as hanging cameras, we even kept our cameras kind of on the fringes because we didn't want to intrude. We didn't know. If there was a big mature deer that was skittish, it didn't tolerate pressure at all, well, we didn't want to push him out. So we just really stayed on the fringes and played the cards we were dealt that we knew we had at the time, and need be towards the latter part of the season, if we needed to, we were going to push in.
So it's getting to be, into that October period, right? And, deer are starting to be on their feet more. And I'm sure on social media, you're seeing, always seeing more and more people shooting deer and, you're getting that itch. And what is that like? And from what I understand on the fringes, you weren't necessarily seeing those bucks that you wanted to harvest. How hard was it for you not to go and just jump right in the middle of that property?
On any other year, I'm sure it would have been really tough. But we got rocked by EHD, and a lot of counties did in Iowa. So that kind of made decision to kind of just hold off and, if just wait for something to show up and not rush into it and make a wrong move. So the EHD definitely played a part in keeping us out of there. But yeah, the wonder is still there. It's like, well, what if I would have walked down and put a trail camera down in this draw or at this creek crossing or something, So you always wonder, but in the end, playing it safe sometimes is your best card to play if you don't know.
So EHD is, typically happens where water holes are drying up and that fly or midge or whatever starts to, be exposed in the ground there. Is that something that's on your property where it's a lot of ponds, water holes, or is that not an issue on your property?
There is one shallow pond. It's not very deep. So yeah, I think it may have actually originated on that farm in some, so it may have been there. I did find 3 dead deer over the latter part of the summer, just on the edges. But yeah, it's in that area though. It's a pretty wet area in neighboring farms and stuff like that. And we had such a high deer concentration in our area that, I mean, once EHD took hold, I mean, when you have that high a number, it just wipes them out.
So let's fast forward to a little later in the season. Walk me through how your strategy changed as it started to get later and deer started getting in that kind of rut phase.
So we really didn't see that many mature deer this year. It was a tough year for a lot of guys, especially, I mean, Colton was the same way. Kyle was the same way. Andy was the same way. We only seen a select few mature deer up until I ended up harvesting this guy. I had only seen 3 mature deer from the tree. So it was just tough. I mean, I think they were doing a lot of it at night. We had all that cold, like that perfect early October cold front weather so early that I think that had an impact as far as the activity we were seeing later on. So it was a grind. It really was a grind, but we just stuck with it. And as the season progressed, that feeling of creeping in and pushing in really started to set in. So
when did you decide that the right time was to finally push in a little further and kind of change your setup? Because, you know, you pushed in and hung a stand the night before you had this insane encounter, which I want to dig into. But what was that time period like? When was that, and what made you jump into the spot that you jumped into?
Well, I hadn't done a lot of walking on that part of the farm, even when we were walking it to buy it. But I guess curiosity killed the cat. I had to go back in there and see. And we were pushing into the later part of November. Nicolette had tagged out, so that pressure was off there. I pretty much filmed her our entire vacation. I just wanted her to get her first buck, get that weight lifted, and then, then we could concentrate on my tag. But the weekend prior, I had walked up in that ridge. I just got too curious, and I hung a camera, and the sign was unbelievable. Rub lines, timbered scrapes, and usually a scrape on a ridge like that is always hot all the time. So I knew that this was going to be a good spot, and it was going to rain. So I didn't do anything that weekend when I checked it out. I just let it wash my scent away, and then came back that following Friday, the night before, and snuck in there and hung a set to where I thought would be the perfect spot to catch a, late November cruising buck. And
what made you think this was the perfect spot?
So in the northwest corner of my farm is my ridge bottlenecks, and it really pinches them down. And with the lay of the land and how deep the creek crossing is behind me, there's just no movement on the downwind side of the tree. All the trails, all the sign was upwind of that tree. So I figured this was the perfect spot. As they would enter my farm on my ridge, there was so much they had to look through. They had to come find it. So I just, naturally from funnel spots and bottlenecks, and you see those spots, you get used to seeing what you need to see. I thought this was going to be the spot I didn't think it would kill like that caliber of a deer, but I knew a mature deer would definitely be using it and had been, judging by the sign that was already there.
Yeah, so normally when you hang a stand first time in is obviously the best. So how did you get this stand in? Did you plan to hunt it the next day? And what kind of strategies, like scent control wise or wind direction or wind speed, did you use to pop that in and get out?
I think one of the important part of it is we had consistent wind direction. So when I hung the stand that day, it was a southwest wind as well, and it was going to be that way the entire weekend. So I was pretty golden. I wasn't going to blow anything, that may have been in the immediate area, how I was accessing from the north side of the farm. So that played a huge role, I think, in getting out of there clean and undetected and getting away with the commotion that I had, I'd been in there and disturbed it, the night before. But just them factors, and minding your scent as well with hanging a tree stand. I mean, that's just as important as hunting. So, I mean, you're in there making disturbance. So leave the least amount of footprint you can,
Yep. Absolutely. So just to talk about the kind of setup a little more. So we're talking, this is kind of on top of the ridge top, right?
Right in this kind of right in the middle of it. Because I always find, if you've ever noticed, big mature bucks, they don't walk the top of a ridge per se during daylight hours. You'll get all sorts of pictures of them at night. They'll do a lot of it at night, but not so much in the daylight. So what I've always noticed is that when bucks are scent checking areas with the wind coming across their nose, they're doing it it seems like they're doing it right in the middle of the ridge, so they can still see over, but yet they can see everything down below and up the other side. So that's kind of, just from past experiences with what mature deer do, was my thought process in picking that particular tree, and everything being upwind of the tree was just icing on the cake. I couldn't get busted in a calling situation.
Yeah, that's huge, and I want to dig into that kind of barrier situation. But I've seen, speaking to ridges like that, I've really seen peak rut stands be very effective, kind of on the side hills or off the edges of a ridge as well. Because I think when those does are being chased, I've seen them time and time again really drop off those ridges and try to run around those points and run around those side hills. I think because they have a better chance of losing the bucks there. So like during peak chase phase, I've always had really good luck in seeing does drop off the edges of those and really run those points around and run the edges, trying to lose those bucks. So diving into kind of not being winded, you said they couldn't get behind you, and you said it set you up for a great calling scenario. Maybe explain that a little bit. Why is that good for calling?
So if obviously, what's the first thing a mature buck's going to do? If he hears commotion, he wants to circle downwind. He wants to figure it out. He wants to know what deer is causing all the ruckus over there. But if he can't do that and he's forced upwind of you, then you've got him beat at the most important factor, it seems like, off the get-go when you are blind calling like that, because you don't know where they're going to come from. But 9 times out of 10, they're going to come pretty dang close to you. They know where you're at, when they hear that. So I think that barrier, like you said, is huge. And then being able to project that situation, on past you, upwind you, like if you're calling turkeys, out of different sides of the blind to try and pull them through you. It's kind of like what I was doing was trying to pull him a mature buck through us, force him to use that exact route to check us out. And the wind was perfect. It was perfect for him, and it was good for us. So he thought he had the upper hand, and we were just this little step above him, luckily, in that situation. So
yeah, and maybe walk through, we know a little bit more about this hunt, but walk through that morning, what kind of information led into your blind calling scenario that, played out the way it did.
So that I probably never replicate this ever in another hunt, but we started utilizing cell cams. This was the first year I've ever really used those a lot, and to have that instant MRI is just huge. It's huge. It's a game changer. You eliminate having to intrude. You can make split decisions based on where you're going to hunt or what your plan is for the next day, all based off that information. But we climbed in that tree, and this isn't a deer that I knew for 4 years, or like a Mr. Maybe or something like that. This was just it was a hunt for a mature buck, and it just happened to be this mature buck. But when that cell cam went off, when we were waiting for that sun to come up, and him standing in our north food plot, like, this is when we closed on the farm, and all the stress that goes into buying a property, it was all gone as soon as that picture came up. It was like, man, we hit the deer lottery, I guess you could call it.
So you're sitting there, you climb into this tree for the first time that you've basically just decided to push into the middle of this farm, right? And you hang the stand the night before. You and your girlfriend head in there, right? You climb up this tree in the dark, not having really any expectations, and your phone goes off as it's getting light, and there stands this giant deer in your north food plot. I mean, What are the chances? And you said it. I mean, it makes all the stress and all the fears go away, but I can't imagine what that feeling's like.
It's crazy because, and to think, when that picture was taken, because my cell cam is an hour behind. So at 7:00, I'll get pictures at 6:00. And in this instance, those were the times. But we were 20 minutes down the road, 10 minutes down the gravel road when he was working my scrape tree in my north food plot. And just to have the stars align to where he checked the scrape and he worked off to continue, looking for that doe, and for us to access the farm that way unknowingly, knowing he was there, all the stars had to align, and it was just, and then to get that picture and just to go, wow.
So fast forward now a little bit. You're now sitting in your tree stand. You're looking at this photo. You see he's in your north food plot. How far away was that photo taken from where you were sitting?
About 350 yards.
Okay. So what happens next?
So we were waiting for the sun to come up. Me and Nicolette were going back and forth of what we were going to do. Were we going to rattle right away? Were we going to just kind of sit and be quiet and kind of take in the morning and stuff? And she was rumbling around in the backpack. She was already hungry. And so I thought, I'll let her eat something real quick and then I'll go ahead and rattle, and so I let out a rattling sequence and a few grunts, and a small 2-year-old buck came just blazing through, looking for the fight, all jacked up. And I thought, man, that quick, this might not be a bad morning after all. And we'd planned to sit all day, so we were there for the long haul. And so I let him work off and waited a few more moments and decided to call again, and just gave a real aggressive sequence and some real aggressive grunts. And that 2-year-old buck came flying back in again, but this time he was nervous. So I knew there was another deer around the area somewhere, and he kept looking behind him, like nervous deer do. And it wasn't a few seconds after that I heard that grunt, and instantly I was like, yeah, there's a big deer, like real close to us. I don't know. I guess I shouldn't say a big deer, but I mean, there's a mature buck. Yeah. And that's a sound that if you've heard enough of them, it's an instant click. Like your brain just is like, okay, here we go. Game on,
Yeah, I always find that funny because and my wife has asked me about that. What's the difference? What do you mean? And it's almost like, you can relate it to almost any animal, a turkey gobble, there's always a deeper turkey gobble or an elk bugle,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of guys can tell, wow, that's probably a mature bull, but like that deep, utteral sound, like you take it on the extinguisher level and it's like, nope, not the fawn, nope, not the doe, nope, not even young buck, mature buck, nope, it's past that. It's like this crazy thing, and it makes your hair stand up just talking about it. But when you hear that, it's like, okay, game on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even Nicolette heard this one. Like normally she doesn't pick up on that stuff, because she's always, when she's running the camera, she's pretty focused on what she's doing, and even she's like, "Did you hear that?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah." I'm like, something's coming, and then he started breaking them branches, and he was almost dragging his feet, like Chancey Walters says, like a herd bull, So he, we were excited because I didn't know what was coming, but it was heavy and it was on a mission. So we were on pins and needles, just staring at that canopy of that tree, just waiting for him to break cover, whatever it was,
Yeah, so some obviously viewers can see the buck on the screen behind you, but if they're just listening, maybe describe this buck a little bit more. How big is he? How many points?
So he ended up scoring 187 and 7/8 inches. I had him officially scored not too long ago. Never had that done before. That's an interesting experience. They got tape and they got tape measure out and all this stuff. But he sits on he's 20 inches wide frame wise. He's got 13 scoreable points. So he's just a giant animal. Main beams were over 27 inches. I mean, just something you couldn't have dreamt it up any better. I still catch myself thinking about it every once in a while, like, oh man, why'd that happen to me type deal, but you put in the years and the time and it eventually will.
So looking at this picture, something we haven't really touched on yet. what is that stick and string that is laying on that deer? That does not look like a Matthews to me.
So I decided, kind of like Colton, that this year was the year to go full trad. I grew up hunting that way. I shot my first few deer with a 40-pound Ben Pearson hunter. It was my grandpa's bow, and wooden arrows, actually. Port Orford cedar arrows is what I started with. And as a sophomore in college, I bought my first compound, and with my dad being diehard traditional guy and my grandpa as well, I thought he was going to disown me when I bought that first compound. But I killed a lot of good deer with a compound, and for this year, I thought it's time to go back, and bring back that childhood feeling and stuff like that. And there's nothing like it. It's just fun. It's so much fun.
Yeah, so back to he's walking in, what is he, 15 yards, closing maybe to 10-5. You get your recurve. Now, what are you thinking at this moment?
Thanks for the chip shot. I mean, you know how we all get, it gets to the moment of truth, and we just we're numb. We're numb to it. You do it enough times, and your mind doesn't give your body doesn't give your mind time to think about it. You do it. It's a primal instinct, really, and I drew back, and I put that broadhead exactly where it needed to be. And I didn't give him time to react or nothing. I mean, it was stop him and let it go,
And I'm sure that comes, that instinct, as much as it's instinct, it doesn't just happen, that comes from a lot of practice and a lot of preparation. I can't imagine the practice and preparation that you had to put into switching back from a compound into traditional again. I mean, I'm sure you shot a lot of arrows through that thing.
Oh yeah. The rest on that's worn. It probably needs replaced. That leather needs replaced, but the crazy thing is how long between the last deer I killed with a recurve versus killing this deer. In the moment of truth, it's like I never quit. I just, it all came back when it needed to, and that's regardless of whether you shoot a compound or whatever you're shooting. It's the moment of truth. That's the almighty decision right there. So, yeah, that's what we practice for. Is that, 10th of a second when we get to let that arrow go for all the marbles,
Reminded me of Tiger Woods when he walked to the putt before it went in the hole. We watched a video earlier of Jacob, and you look at the GoPro angle, and as he releases the arrow, it's going to the buck, and you can see him. He's got his hand up in the air. He's already cheering. 10 ringed him, But I mean, it was pretty incredible. But
yeah, quite the moment.
Yeah, guys, just unbelievable footage, and you'll have to look for the hunt breakdown here this fall. Your girlfriend Nicolette filmed it. She did a rock star job. I mean, I have filmed lots of kills and lots of deer get shot, and I can tell you I would have been a wreck, like even running the camera.
Well, that's crazy. That's the other crazy thing that I can't get over is how green she is, or she was, to this stuff. Like up until 2.5, 3 years ago, she never went hunting. And then to throw her behind a video camera, for her to want to do it and to take on that responsibility and just to figure out, the technology and stuff like that. She's a trooper. She's awesome. And she's cold-blooded killer herself now. So that's pretty awesome. The bug's bitter and she's infected. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. So, what do you think? So we're in late November, at this point, when you're hunting this deer, and tell me about what kind of calling specifically you were doing. Were you really aggressive? What were you thinking? What was your mindset, trying to call these deer in?
So in late November like that, I think it's crucial to remember that a lot of our does are bred by then. A lot of them have cycled out, but there's still a few remaining in. So these mature bucks, especially in our area, like I said, we got wrecked by EHD. So the no numbers were really down. So what mature bucks were left that didn't succumb themselves to it were really covering ground to find that last doe. And so I think being aggressive is a big thing. I think people sometimes get too caught up in that pre-rut where they think that's where all the fighting and where all the dominance goes down. And a good share of it does. But I think in late November can be some of the best calling, because it's like we revert right back to that, because they're reverting back to covering a bunch of ground, being dominant, finding that last doe, and you can really throw the kitchen sink at them. And big thing for me is directional. Paint that picture that everything's past you. If everything's past you, that deer's got to come through you to get to it. So that's the big key, I think, especially in heavy cover, to keep them working, because you'll see time and time again that when in calling scenarios, you'll have a big mature buck come in and he'll stop and he'll survey the situation. And then he'll decide, I don't see what I'm looking for. So he turns around and he goes the other way. That's why it reverts back to turkey hunting again. Paint the picture. They got to come through you to get to it.
Good deal. That's awesome. So one question for you before we get out of here. What is your favorite way to eat venison?
Oh man, fire up the Traeger and let her go for about 4 hours. That's a good way to do her. A little brown sugar.
Yeah, just brown sugar, not
brown sugar, garlic, salt, and then actually Famous Dave's makes a rib rub that's pretty darn good. So
nice. Have to try that out. Sounds pretty good. Well, the weather's getting warm. We'll have to bust the trigger, smoke her back out. See, here in Minnesota, I gotta put mine in the garage for a while, because it takes a while to warm up when it's -30.
Yikes.
But, well, thanks for joining us, Jacob. Guys, look forward to seeing Jacob's hunt on Hunt Breakdowns this fall. That'll be on the free Deer Society app or on YouTube. This is an impressive deer. He's got a shed sitting over there from this deer that the neighbor gave you from the year before?
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. It was during second shotgun season. I got a text message from a friend, and it was a picture of a guy holding this big antler up, and he goes, dude, I don't, you tell me, but I think this is your deer. And I was able to get in contact with him, and they were nice enough to give me the shed. So it's pretty cool. It sat out in a cattle pasture for an entire year.
I know. Well, a heck of a buck, world-class deer. Even more special to do it on your own farm, getting back into the traditional archery thing. So the footage is unreal, out of this world. So definitely check that out. If you're listening, subscribe. Definitely check us out on YouTube, Deer Society app. It's free and tons of great content on there. So guys, thanks for listening. JJ, Jacob, it's a pleasure. It was fun. And,
thank you.
Till next time.